Welcome. Hi, I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here. Morena team, hope you're having a great week. And really looking forward to bringing to you today my conversation with Craig Emmerich. Now, Craig is the husband of Maria Emmerich over at Maria Mind Body Health and Keto-Adapt. And both Craig and Maria have spent the last 15 years researching and implementing practices for successful keto approaches with thousands of people. So they're really well known. They have an awesome website over at mariamindbody.com, and they're also co-authors on a number of best-selling books such as The Carnivore Cookbook, Keto, The Complete Guide to Success for the Ketogenic Diet, The Art of Fat Loss, one that I've just purchased, and also the Protein Sparing Modified Fast Cookbook. And we dive all into the science behind protein sparing modified fasts. In addition to that though, we talk about the ketogenic approach, how they got into adopting it, some of the pitfalls they see with their clients, and some of the best strategies to help support a well-formulated ketogenic approach. We also dive into the topic of nutrition for kids, because their kids thrive on a ketogenic approach. And we talk about Craig and his experience with his Lyme disease and how he's used diet and lifestyle to help manage those symptoms around that. So you can find Craig over at mariamindbody.com and enjoy my conversation with Craig Emmerich. Kia ora, Craig. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, hey, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat to me this morning. I really appreciate it. And as we were chatting just a little bit off here, you are on the beautiful island of Maui.
Yes, that's where we're at right now for the next few months. Trying to get away from those Wisconsin winters as much as we can.
I totally appreciate that. And I'm pretty sure I saw on Maria, your wife's Twitter account yesterday, this most amazing drone picture of a paddle board. Was it like a great, like a, what was it? Like a
Humpback whale.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons we love Maui in the winter is because the humpback whales, all the whales up in Alaska, so they feed and spend their summers in Alaska, and then they swim 5,000 miles down to Hawaii to have their babies because There's no predators here. There's also no food, so they're very much, fattening up there, and then they eat nothing all the way down here. And while they're here, and then they have their babies, they mate here, and then they go swim all the way back with their babies and
Amazing.
Start feeding again.
Yeah.
But while they're here, it's really amazing during the winter months here, because there's so many whales in this concentrated area. You see them all the time. And Maria went out with my son Micah on the paddleboard, and a baby got curious and kept coming closer and closer and actually rubbed up against their board when it came up.
Amazing.
The mommy didn't like that too much.
Yeah.
And so the mom tried to give the baby some distance.
Yeah.
So you see the mom come up from underneath the board, which, mommy is, 50 tons and, 50 feet long.
Yeah.
She came up and just kind of nudged, but they're just these amazing, they're very aware of their surroundings and very gentle giants, really.
Yeah.
And you can see that it was very careful to slide the baby away while not touching the board. It was just amazing. I have a drone, so I was filming it all from the top, and it's just amazing to see.
Amazing. And is it unusual to have the whales so close to where you are?
Very unusual. We've had that happen. Maria's had it happen twice in the 20 years that we've come here, and she's always going out and trying to see the whales. But every once in a while, you get a calf that is maybe a new calf
Yeah.
and it's just curious. It's
Yeah.
looking around at what is this thing, and the moms will intervene if they
Yeah.
get too close for
Yeah.
comfort. So
Yeah. Amazing to be so close to something so massive, right? And
yeah,
nature.
it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. So, Craig, one of the reasons I'm really excited to chat to you today is, of course, your work in the keto space, and not just ketogenic diet and the work that you and Maria have done to bring, your cookbooks and your online presence to life, but also, of course, some of the, I suppose, the background reasons for why you delved into it in the first place. Particularly as I understand you're a particular lover of German beer. Am I right about that? Back in
Yeah,
the
so
day?
we talk about, so I'll do a short story of kind of the history. I met Maria, and at the time I met her, she was struggling with a lot of health issues. She
Mm.
had some extra weight that she wanted to get rid of. She had IBS, she had acid reflux, she had PCOS, and it was really, daily bother to her system with all these issues. And so she tried to do everything she could to reverse them or to help with them. And doctors weren't really a help because not one of them asked about what she was eating.
Mm.
Uh, Try to prescribe her, prescriptions or whatever for IBS and that. And so she kept researching, and she even went to college for exercise and science and nutrition. And the things she was learning was the things she was already doing, which is the standard food pyramid of healthy whole grains and low fat and all of that kind of stuff. She was like,
Yeah.
I'm doing it and it's not working. And she was even running marathons and she couldn't get rid of the excess weight. And so she's like, there's got to be a solution here. And right around that time, our puppy that was her puppy got sick and was losing patches of hair.
Mm.
And first thing the vet said was when they took her in was, "What are you feeding her?" And it was kind of a light bulb moment for her that maybe it's my food. Maybe I
Mm.
am following the standard American diet, or not standard American diet, but the food pyramid is not working for me. And so she started researching and finding out about low carb and keto, and this is 20 years ago.
Mm.
And she started implementing on herself, and then she reversed her PCOS. She got rid of her acid reflux and IBS, and felt amazing, and lost the extra weight, even though she stopped running marathons because it was hard on her joints.
Yeah.
So, it was like this kind of aha, and of course, everybody started asking her, how do you do this? And so she started helping people with it and writing her first book. And, the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah.
Myself, I didn't have any health issues at the time. I
Mm.
had maybe 30 pounds of extra weight that I could have stood to lose. But I didn't have any health issues day to day. And so it wasn't as pressing of a need for me. And so it took me probably 4 or 5 years later, probably about 16 years ago, that I finally came along,
Mm.
because I have a strong German background and I brewed my own beer. And, I was just kind of, to switch to something like this was just seemed foreign at the time. But what happened was I'd eat during the week what she made me. And, she'd pack me lunches and everything. And I'd feel great during the week. And then on the weekends, we'd go to restaurants and I'd have beer and, some French fries and a bun. And I felt terrible. And I
Mm.
just finally made the connection of, you know what? I hate how I feel on the weekends. I
Yeah.
just want to feel this way all the time.
Yeah.
And so I just switched over and haven't looked back since, and yeah, so it was a tough transition, but it was definitely for the best.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say with regards to how you felt in the weekend compared to how you felt during the week, where where you were eating much more lower carb. And I think this is often the thing with the dietary change is people don't appreciate how good they could feel
Yeah,
until they experience it. And I often have that conversation with clients that sometimes a good reminder for them as to why they're following an approach that we might work out together is because when they veer off that course and they have a weekend where they're not really in control of what they do and they have a few things here or there, they wake up with massive food hangovers basically
yeah,
because of the
yeah,
stuff that they
and
put in.
exactly. And we've been doing this, like I said, almost, Maria's been helping clients for probably 16 plus years. And thing that has been constant about this with this lifestyle throughout is that everybody that comes full in, buys on and really, commits to it and does it, they stick with it because of how they feel, not because of the weight loss, right?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
most diets, it's lose the weight quick and then go do something else because you're like starving all the time and all, typical diet kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And yet this one with this, they, their symptoms go away for all these autoimmune disorders and all these conditions. They get off prescription drugs. We had one client that was taking 600 prescription pills a month, 30 a
Holy.
day,
Right.
and she's down to none within a couple months.
That is.
And how the side effects, everything that, how much that different she felt after that. But all these different conditions, people getting huge improvements. Parkinson's. We had a client who hadn't had feeling in this place on their heel for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And within a few months of this lifestyle was walking better and had feeling in that area again.
Yeah.
I mean, these are life-changing physical, health changes. The weight loss is usually just a kind of side, a bonus, a
Yeah.
little extra benefit
Yeah.
that comes with how amazing they feel.
And I think it's, with regards to Maria's story, it's really interesting because often you hear that a keto type approach is not the best approach for women, right? And this is
Yeah.
this is certainly, and of course with a lot of clients that I've certainly seen that because I see a lot of athletic women, keto isn't necessarily just in its own right the best approach for them all of the time. But I think people fail to appreciate that, there's another side of things. And so with Maria's PCOS, which is basically insulin resistance, like low carb keto is one of the best things you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And undoubtedly, because I've been a long time follower of Maria since I've kind of delved into this area, maybe about 8 years or so ago. She was probably one of the first people that I came across with her amazing recipes and things like that.
Yeah.
And I heard her story is that she's quite clearly thriving and has continued to thrive under that approach. So I think that that there's that misconception that even if it does work for women, it's not going to work, all of the time. And I think this is just such a good example of how there are so many different ways that you can approach a health problem. And keto is certainly a very good option for a lot of people.
Well, here's what I would add to that. And this is a very important point, I think. There's a lot of ways to do keto.
Yes.
Okay? There's a lot of bad ways to do it for long-term health. And you could eat nothing but Crisco and be ketogenic, right?
Yes.
But I don't think anybody would say that would be a healthy approach, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they fall into this kind of camp where they do a therapeutic ketogenic diet, which was originally developed, this 80% fat or, these really high fat ratios for epilepsy in the early 1900s, because it's really good at controlling seizures.
Yeah.
Well, that's a therapeutic approach for a very specific situation. People think that's how you do keto in general. And what happens is, especially in women, when they try to do that and they use percentages to try to hit those ratios, they end up eating a lot of fat and not enough protein. And that is the situation that causes so many problems for women, especially athletes. And in general, regardless of diet, women typically undereat protein to begin with.
Yes.
So if you start going in to try to do ratios and suddenly you're eating 40 or 50 grams of protein and it's not nearly enough for your body, guess what happens? You start losing your hair falls out because low protein will cause that.
Yeah.
Not getting enough protein, sleep issues. All these things are typically driven by, not having a well-formulated ketogenic diet. And that's the key. And making protein a priority and focus is what ends up getting you those results.
Yeah, and that's certainly something I've appreciated from what I've seen as your approach with keto out there and the information you put out, because of course you do see a lot of that much more of a a lower protein approach being advocated by people who think that is the only way to do keto. Has your keto approach, has that changed over time, Craig, or?
Slightly, we've been doing this for 20 years, and so we've tried different things and we've tried different approaches, but we always have end up coming back to that protein priority or protein focus, because that's what works best.
Yeah.
And especially in the last 8 or 10 years, when we've I dove totally into this business about 10 years ago. I was an electrical engineer, and I left that job and started just doing 100% of our business. And when I did that, I just started researching biology and everything I could get my hands on as well. And so everything I've learned from biology and how our bodies work reinforced the need to focus on protein first.
Mm.
When you do that, not only do you get the amino acids your body needs to build and repair its tissues, you also get tons of nutrients. So that's the
Yeah.
thing that we put in our books, these chapters years ago now, and like in our keto book, a whole chapter on nutrients in food, because I think this is something we've misunderstood: is where do we get our vitamins and minerals from? If you put a steak with some kale and some blueberries on a plate and ask somebody, where are you getting your vitamins and your minerals? They probably say the kale or maybe the blueberries.
Yeah.
In reality, it's the steak.
Yeah.
You get more vitamins and minerals across a wide range. I did a chart with 14 of the most essential vitamins and minerals, and just a steak beats kale and blueberries on like 12 of them.
Yeah.
12 out of 14.
Yeah.
And so you're really getting all your nutrients in that steak. And so this, I think, is what, when you do a well-formulated ketogenic diet with a priority of protein, you get super nutrient dense food in addition to the protein you need. And that fuels healing, because what do your body need? What does your body need to heal? Protein, amino acids, if there's repair to be done, and vitamins and minerals. Your body needs those nutrient dense foods to heal. So that's what a focus on protein really gives you that.
Yeah, nice. And can you describe to me just kind of how, if someone was to like work with Maria or yourself, how you might approach working with an individual and how that kind of looks for someone on a plate?
Yeah. So, we have a macro calculator on our website, which is free. If people can go and get their macros. Again, we focus on macros, so grams of fat, protein, and carbs, not percentages, because that's much better, and it fits the goals that you need for your body. Our calculator is based off of lean mass. So what changes for a ketogenic diet for macros? Primarily, it's protein and maybe fat a bit based on your lean mass. If you're a 5 foot tall woman who's only got 80 pounds of lean mass, you don't need as much protein as a 6 foot tall man, and their protein needs. So that our calculator adjusts for that. So then that becomes your protein goal, which is based on how much you need to build and repair your body, which people underestimate how much is needed for that. The Nobel Prize winner for autophagy, he estimated, based on his calculations of how much autophagy is happening all the time,
Yeah.
it's about 20% of our BMR. So if
Wow.
people aren't familiar with autophagy, it's the cellular rebuilding, if you will, where it takes a cell and it breaks it apart and makes a new cell if the cell is old or aging or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
About 20% of our BMR, which calculates out to you turn over all your cells in about 3 months.
Yeah. Amazing.
Just think about that. It's crazy to think about, but your body's constantly rebuilding cells. So you need that constant supply of amino acids to fuel that.
Yeah, and people might be familiar with autophagy when we talk about things like fasting, for example. Exercise is another thing which helps increase autophagy. Coffee increases autophagy. In fact, Craig, I remember thinking, well, sometimes I fast and I exercise and I drink coffee. Like, is there ever a time when I'm actually not, having that autophagy process?
Well, and that's a good point, though, too, is that autophagy is going on all the time.
Yeah.
Regardless of what your diet or anything is. So your
Yeah.
body's like doing it at some level.
Yeah.
The question is how much, right?
Yeah.
Yes, fasting, we don't really like fasting longer than 24 hours because you start to lose lean mass.
Yeah.
But, intermittent fasting, where you just compress the time you eat in a day to maybe 6 hours or 8 hours, that increases autophagy when you've been not eating anything for a longer period of time. But strength training is probably one of the biggest increases of autophagy that you can do.
Yeah.
Plus, you build strength and muscle.
Yeah.
So there's no negatives there.
Yeah, totally. It's a win-win. And I, like you, I'm not a big fan of the extended fast for the reasons that you describe as well. And also, I think a lot of people I work with, they've spent so many years in some cases decades of restricting what they do in terms of food. So I often and I'm a fan of food and eating delicious
Yeah.
things, and so I feel like if there is a way to do it and actually enjoy the food, then that is my preference, and also get those nutrients you need, because often when you talk to people about
Yeah.
fasting, you've got that kind of 16-8, but then you've got 20-4, and then you've got the one meal a day, and then you've got the people who are like, oh, I've been fasting for 5 days.
Well, and that's the thing I don't like about the longer ones is, again, the best studies on this show that if you fast longer than 24 hours, your body's, I mean, you're constantly turning over cells, again, like we talked, but you're also, you're shedding skin all day. I mean, you need this supply of protein,
Yeah.
amino acids. And so when you don't have that, you start losing lean mass.
Yeah.
About a quarter pound a day if you start the fast ketogenic. If you start not ketogenic and fast, it's over a pound a day at first.
Yeah.
And the ketogenic diet then becomes protein sparing after about a day and a half, 2 days.
Yeah.
And then it goes down to about a quarter pound a day.
Yeah.
But again, quarter pound of lean mass a day of muscle, that's not easy to replace,
No.
right? I mean, so we shouldn't take that lightly. And that's why instead we prefer something called a protein sparing modified fast, which mimics a lot of the benefits of longer fasting
Yeah.
without the negatives. And really what it is little to no carbs, fat intake of maybe only 30 grams for the whole day. And that's enough for, building sex hormones and absorbing fat soluble vitamins, and then protein at your goal, or maybe a little more. What that does is it forces your body to burn more of its own fat for fuel.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of the benefits of a longer fast without the negatives of losing lean mass.
Yeah, and I think I heard you talk on Rob Wolf's podcast a couple of years ago about protein sparing modified fast. And although I'd heard about it somewhere else, it was really the first real discussion that I had heard of it. And I was really intrigued because so a strange kind of introduction into all of this stuff. Like I'm a nutritionist who, like Maria, studied nutritional science and exercise at university, but of course, also like Maria, learned the conventional kind of approach. And then when I started delving into this area, I remember coming across a book called The Dukan Diet. Yeah. And so when you were talking to Rob about protein sparing modified fast, in the back of my head, I was like, this is like the Dukan diet. And for people who, which it isn't, but this is what it reminded me of. So for people who aren't familiar with the Dukan, and this was quite popular in New Zealand maybe 7 or 8 years ago. You basically have phases of a dietary approach, if I'm remembering it correctly, where there'd be certain days where you would eat nothing but protein, and then you would gradually reintroduce a day where you might have some vegetables, and then reach a point kind of later on down the line where you're eating a fairly standard approach to a diet, but you might have one day of a protein sparing modified fast, essentially, because it was just lean protein. Except, of course, Dukan was a big fan of Diet Coke. Like, that was fine. You could have as much Diet Coke as you wanted. Appealing to me at the time.
If you take kind of a mixture of some of those principles in the Dukan diet, and then the early Atkins, like the 70s, where he, not the processed food crap that it turned into, but his first books and his the way he did it when he was alive, they got a lot right.
Yeah.
They both were well ahead of their time, and they got a lot right in their focus on protein, carbs to a minimum to help control hunger. That's the approach. Really, those are the roots of a lot of what we do today.
So with the protein sparing modified fast, what would a day on the plate look like for someone and how would someone put that into their, I suppose, their ketogenic approach? And do you need to be ketogenic in order to do it? So what is your kind of take on that?
Yeah. So just a little plug. We have 2 ebooks, but we just launched a new ebook called The Art of Fat Loss, which is a protein sparing modified fast ebook. So that one, we have meal plans and everything, but really what we recommend, and you don't have to be keto to do it, although it'll make it easier to do it.
Yeah.
Because you control hunger and you won't have those kind of carb withdrawals, if you will, as you come off of the higher carbs. but what we recommend is usually do 2 or 3 days a week
Mm-hmm.
of protein sparing, and then regular keto, weight loss macros the other days, for clients that want to lose weight quickly or break a stall. Um, and what the day looks like, it's really leaner protein focus.
Mm.
And what's really amazing about it is there's something about protein without a lot of fat added that drives massive amount of satiety.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so great. It's because, you know, we talked earlier about extended fasts. They can be hard the first couple
Yeah.
days. Satiety, things kind of level out after that, make it a little easier. But what's great about this is it's only anywhere from maybe 650 to 800 calories.
Mm.
Uh, Typically around, 650, 700 calories
Mm-hmm.
for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And we have clients time and time again tell us, I can't eat all the food.
Amazing. Yeah.
I'm so full, I don't even know if I can finish these meal plans that are 700 calories.
Yeah.
And yet they're getting all the protein their body needs. They're getting all these vitamins and minerals because it's very nutrient dense.
Yeah.
So you focus on things like, chicken, like chicken breast, fish. Almost any fish is good for protein sparing. Seafood, especially like shrimp,
Yeah.
really good. Leaner cuts of meats like loins or filet mignon,
Mm.
those kind of things, pork loin. Um, those are really great protein sparing foods. So you focus on mainly that, maybe a little bit of low carb veggie with that if you like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a protein sparing.
Yeah. And that's not that far removed from like the 800, I think it's called Fast 800 from Michael Mosley, if you've heard that,
Uh,
and also the 5-2 approach that he's also, and I've used with clients as well, where just in terms of the amount of energy provided on the days where they are in their kind of restricted energy days. And then, of course, I'm thinking Volta Longo with his longevity approach, where the caloric load is similar, but the premise is very different because he's very anti-protein, which, as I understand it, Stu Phillips and Luke Van Loon and that are all kind of, I remember Stu Phillips saying, we are writing a rebuttal to that protein story that Volta Longo kind of tells people, because there is a lot of misinterpretation of the actual data. But from the caloric load, where you have a lot less kind of dietary energy going in, it's not too different. But the way that you're describing it actually sounds a lot more doable for people, I think.
yeah, if I had a Victor Lugo approach with the low protein, I would be starving. I
Mate.
can guarantee.
Yes.
The body. There's a lot of theories and evidence towards what's called a protein leveraging, or where your body will actually kind of drive you to eat more
Yeah.
until you get enough protein.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the hunger signals, because it knows how badly it needs those amino acids. So if you're not eating enough protein, it's going to drive more hunger and drive you to eat more of anything till it gets that protein.
Yeah,
So,
I've seen those studies on that protein leverage theory, and it's quite clear. I remember this one study which I share with my students, and that then they changed the protein percentages, and look, across the board, actually their highest protein load is actually still it's not that high. It's more of a moderate protein. I think it's like 25%. But certainly, even if you've got between 10% of the diet coming from protein, which sounds low, but I talk to a lot of people with very low protein, like they'd be in and around that probably. Even the difference between 10 and 25%, you get people eating an additional, say, 350 calories, predominantly from carbohydrate, because that's that drive to eat.
yeah, and again, there's a lot of other evidence on vitamins and minerals. If you have low nutrient density, you drive more hunger because your body needs the vitamins and minerals. Well, again, back to animal proteins are some of the most nutrient dense foods you can eat.
Yeah.
So you that as well, and that drives the satiety as well. But if you look again back to the, like our meal plans in the book, you're getting 400 to 500 calories of protein.
Yeah.
And even that, again, back to the, weight loss is the goal and all that, thermic effect of food is another big factor. So one of the things about our food that really changes, the caloric amounts and whatnot, is the thermic effect, which is how much energy your body has to use to process that food. protein is very high. The thermic effect is 25 to 30%,
Yeah.
depending on the protein source.
Mm.
Or things like fat are like 3%.
Yeah.
And so those 400 to 500 calories, you can basically negate 100 or 150 calories of it
Yeah.
because of the thermic effect.
Yeah.
So again, even though you're driving satiety,
Yeah.
you're getting vitamins and minerals, and you're getting protein your body needs,
Yeah.
you're also getting the thermic effect. And so, you're maybe taking in a net of like 500 calories and being satiated,
Yeah.
which is insane.
And I feel like people misunderstand that I suppose the thermic effect of fat actually, because of course in a ketogenic approach, you often hear that, like, you can eat as much fat as you like and fat is really satisfying. Whereas actually, particularly women actually don't feel so satisfied with fat the way that they do with protein. And I, when I kind of talk to people about fat and that, for every 100 calories of fat you eat, your body's going to easily store probably 99 of them compared to
Yeah.
that 25% that you were describing with protein,
Yeah.
which is, as I understand it as well. Almost a light bulb kind of goes off on them, because if we think about foods which are advocated on a keto approach, and they're great foods, macadamia nuts, avocado, nut butters, although that's a dangerous territory really for a lot of people. They're like, a bit addictive. But
Yeah.
it's very easy to overeat them, and then of course, if you say to
Yes.
someone, have a miserly, quarter a cup of nuts, that's not a whole lot of food. Whereas with protein, it's just so different.
Yeah. And we actually tell clients if your fat loss is your goal and you're not seeing the results, we tell all of our clients cut 100% of dairy and nuts, because they
Interesting.
are very energy dense.
Yeah.
And they're two of the foods. There's been studies on this as well. Foods that don't drive satiety as well, calorie for calorie.
Yes.
Dairy and nut are on the tops.
Yeah.
There's something about them. I don't know if it's the hyperpalatability or the very dense. You eat, and there's been things too. I've seen these online where there's like a hand with one side it's 100 calories of nuts, and the other side it's 200.
Yeah.
And it looks like there's maybe one or two more nuts.
Yeah.
So if you grab a handful, how much did you really grab there?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so there's that as well. But the thing with I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's dairy and nuts can be problematic. Oh, and back to the fats. I mean, part of this too is very dependent on goals,
Yeah.
right? We work with one of the Dr. Kiltz at CNY Fertility, is a top fertility doctor in the country, gets some of the highest success rates for fertility with women. And it's because he puts 100% he puts every client on keto.
Interesting.
And it's a little more fat, higher approach,
Yeah.
Versus like a weight loss.
Yeah.
Because all of our sex hormones are derived from saturated fat and cholesterol.
Yeah.
And that's just one of the precursors and building blocks of it.
Yeah.
And so when you put him on this ketogenic diet, he gets huge success rates. And so while fat is good and the right kinds of fats are very healthy, it depends on your goals. If you want to lose fat on your body, don't add as much to the diet.
Absolutely. And you know what, Craig, you raise a really interesting point, because a lot of women who approach keto from that fat loss perspective, but then also don't see success with it. Often it is, well, obviously the protein is the big component, but also with women, like, we can really struggle to add things into the diet. Tell us to drop something out, no problem. We've been doing that for years. We're very good at that. But to actually increase the fat, that, with which for these women, or protein, which would actually help the successful implementation of a keto approach, they really struggle with that. So with what you said with that fertility doctor, I'm not surprised at all. And I imagine that having the guidance of someone and that real goal would help, I suppose, a woman kind of get her head around eating more.
But I think it also highlights what we talked about earlier, which is, one of the things people say women can't do keto is because it's not good for fertility. Well, it actually drives fertility. And we see this all the time. We have lots of clients where, if they're still at an age, maybe, low 40s, where they don't think they're going to have any more kids.
Yeah.
You want to be careful when you go keto, because it's very enhancing for fertility.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And I've got to say, I did actually purchase the ebook a couple of weeks ago. And
Thank you.
I have to say, and I don't know and if it's Maria is the one behind it. I suspect it is, and apologies if I'm wrong, but her recipes are so innovative and amazing. I absolutely love them. And the way that she uses eggs
Yeah.
is like one of the best sources of protein, like the egg bread, the amazing egg pancakes, the egg milkshakes. I say milkshakes, smoothies actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the pudding is one that people can't believe that. So we have Maria, it's on our blog, it's also in our books, and there's a protein sparing modified fast version of the chocolate pudding in that Art of Fat Loss book. You start with hard boiled eggs,
Yeah.
and people are like, "You're making pudding out of this?" And yet it works so well. You cannot believe how good it tastes when you're done. But I started out from when we adopted our sons and our baby Kai. We really wanted to get some eggs in him because we knew how much how healthy they were, and then all the nutrients in them. And he wouldn't. We tried cooking them every way we could possibly think of, and he just didn't like eggs that
Mm.
much. And so she's like, "All right, I'm gonna get some eggs in this kid somehow." So she started playing around with this, blending it, and she came up with this pudding, and he loved it.
Amazing.
And we get this all the time from parents. My kids won't eat eggs, but they love your pudding.
That's
And
fantastic.
the protein sparing version just uses the whites instead of the whole egg,
Yep.
and so you get all that protein. And people have asked me multiple times, so this is just 2 servings? Because you make this pudding with the egg whites, and it's 10 egg whites
Yeah.
plus the other ingredients,
Yeah.
and they get all this pretty good amount of pudding,
Yeah.
and it's like 200 and some calories per serving
Yeah.
for 2 servings. The whole batch is like 400 calories.
It's amazing.
And then again, satiety,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
And particularly so personally, I'm a bit of a volume eater. Like I like to
Mhm.
see big amounts of food on my plate, and I like to eat big amounts of food. So so with Maria's innovation in and around things like that, something I completely appreciate. And of course, I will put links to your cookbooks on
Thank you.
the show notes so people can see them, because I also have to say it's very reasonably priced. So it was,
Thank you.
it was
No,
very accessible.
yeah, and your assumption is right. Maria does all the recipes for our book. She's the innovator, the scientist in the kitchen, and I'm kind of the scientist on the rest of it. So, any of our recent books, any of the front matter,
Yeah.
where we talk about biology and all that, that's me.
Yeah, yeah. And do you know, it's interesting, Craig, a lot of the people in the low carb keto space haven't necessarily had a nutrition background. And I feel like that's actually been super helpful, because you don't go into it with with blinkers on, which is as I have
Yeah,
I approached nutrition up until, I kind of, I don't know, the light bulb moment, if you like, the same that Maria would have had. But it's, if you've learned something in a university classroom, it's really difficult to then kind of turn your back on that. Whereas from that,
yeah,
as an engineer, particularly, you're a problem solver. I don't know,
yeah,
mathematical
yeah,
scientist. You've got all the elements you
yeah. No,
need to actually not look at something from an emotional, subjective perspective, I suppose.
yeah. I think that is a good point. We when I was an electrical engineer, we looked at things as systems, right?
Mm,
And everything, like if I had a computer chip that I was working on and the outputs were wrong, first thing I'm gonna do is go look at the inputs.
yeah,
Were my input correct? So if the inputs were correct, that means there's something wrong with the chip. If the inputs were wrong, well, then I got to go downstream and figure out why the inputs were wrong, right?
yeah,
It's that kind of system approach, and I think I've brought a lot of that into this space, and I think there's actually a lot of people in this community that I have an engineering background that have come into this space. In the US, we have Tyler Cartwright from Keto Gains.
yeah,
He's an engineer. Ted Neiman is a very, very big on protein leveraging
yes,
and keto, and he's a doctor now, but he was an engineer as well. There's people like Marty Kendall, who's
yeah,
down. He's an engineer. We got all these engineers. Ivor Cummins, who's big into keto and cholesterol and all that,
yeah,
and Dave Feldman. Dave, Dave Feldman is big on cholesterol and understanding that in a keto context. These are all engineers, and
yeah,
I think we've come into this with a different view of things.
yeah,
And back to the system, I look at the body as a system, and it's got inputs and outputs, and the inputs, are huge, like diet,
yeah.
getting enough sunlight
Hmm.
and exposure, exercise, getting enough sleep. These are all inputs to the body, to the system. And when they get off, you get bad outputs.
Yeah.
You get autoimmune disorders. You get, diabetes and, type 2 diabetes and these metabolic problems. So go back upstream and fix the inputs.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we approach everything.
Yeah.
And I try to, bring that across in our books.
Yeah, and you do such a fabulous job of that. And I think it really works to have the nutritionist, if you like, with the engineer because it's that translation. And this is the other thing that you guys do so well, is that translation of knowledge into actually practical tips which people can use. And what I will say is people who, you often hear a criticism that people like some of the names that you described. Well, what would they know because they haven't studied nutrition? And when I hear that as a person who has studied nutrition, I'm like, well, that's the benefit because they haven't studied nutrition. And they are very good at reading science and they're very good at critiquing without any sort of set bias.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And, I think it's personally, I think one of the things that really helped me is I actually went from engineering into product management. And as a product manager, you're kind of like the CEO of a product and where you have to disseminate, and this is in like engineering and computer technology. And later on, I was in healthcare, like informatics, like healthcare software, things like software that analyzes, CT and PET scans, that kind of very technical stuff. I've got to decipher that and message it in a way that everybody in the company, from the engineers working on it up through the CEO or the sales team, provide that messaging to understand what this is doing. And I think that really helped me, be able to disseminate information that might be pretty technical, in multiple ways to help people understand it. And I think biology can be a lot of the same. You start talking about all of the hormones and, things going on in the body, it can get into the weeds pretty quickly. For the general public, if you can decipher that into a way that's just easy to understand, you can get very complicated topics that help people understand it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Craig, if we go back to the protein sparing modified fast just briefly before I then ask you something about your own health journey. So who would not benefit from utilizing that approach, do you think?
Well, I think, anybody who wants to lose body fat or improve body composition, it's great. If you're lean and you're an athlete and, you don't need to lose body fat necessarily, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because that's not your goal, right?
Yeah.
We work with a lot of athletes as well, men and women, and, their approach can be a bit different. Fat is their fuel. And so, they're going to need a lot of fat and they got to really select the types of fat based on what kind of performance they're doing and all of that, but also, the right amounts, fuel them for races. We did a conference this last fall with, and one of the people we had on was Zach Bitter, who's a world record holder now and a whole bunch of things, 100 miles, 12-hour running. And, his fueling approach is a lot different.
Yeah.
Because, he's running 100 miles at world record speed.
Yeah.
But primarily in his training and everything else, he's almost carnivore and, very ketogenic. And then on the race days, he's basically monitoring how much glucose per hour and how much fat per hour do I need to fuel and sustain what I'm doing, right? And so gets almost scientific in how he fuels.
Yeah.
Very different approach than the typical person just trying to lose 20 pounds of body fat.
Absolutely. And I actually just chatted to Zach a month or so ago because I'm a big fan of him and his and I love his podcast. There's another woman actually on Maui called Cynthia Monteleone, I think is her name. Have you heard of her?
I haven't. I'm going to write that down. And
I was going to say she is a 400-meter world record holder. She's carnivore and she's over 40. So her Instagram handle is fast over 40. And I've also interviewed her actually for this podcast.
She just contacted us. That's what I was going to look it up because fast over 40. She wanted to meet us here.
100%. You guys would totally connect. Like she is amazing. And she undoubtedly, like, you have so much synergy with what you do and what you promote.
Awesome.
It would be great to have, and if you do meet up, you guys should like record it for the benefit of everyone who's interested in this space, because that would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah. Now, Craig, can we talk a little bit about your own health journey? Because as I understand it, it was maybe 7 or so years ago that you started getting chronic pain. Is that right?
Yes. So going back again, maybe 15, 16 years ago, I was keto and I felt amazing. Lost that extra 30, 35 pounds that I had, and felt great. All the mental clarity and everything. I could really focus on my job and everything. Got to about 8 or 9 years ago, I started having back pain. And the whole story on this is in high school, I damaged a disc in my lower back. And throughout my life, a few times a year, I would have shooting pain from like the disc slipping because the disc was damaged and torn. And, I managed it as best I could. And I started getting this stiffness and soreness in my lower back. And it just was there all the time. Instead of like shooting pain down my leg like it used to be, it was always sore and tight. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe it's just that, that injury kind of rearing its head again in a different way. But over the years, over about 6, 7 years, it got worse. It moved up my back, into my shoulders, into my neck, and it was just this constant stiffness and pain, and it progressed to immobility, reducing my mobility. And so I finally just said, something's something's wrong here. I shouldn't be this, early 40s and struggling
Yeah.
to throw a football as far as my 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Right. So granted, he's got a great arm, but I still should be able to throw a ball further than him, when we play football. But so I finally said, you know what, the whole story, I went in to a doctor, got some tests done, and he did I said, this sounds a lot like Lyme. He did the standard Western blot Lyme test, and it came back negative. Like, okay, what is it? And he started mentioning maybe autoimmune stuff or whatever. A year later, after it kept getting worse, I'm like, I got to figure this out. So I went into a functional medicine doctor who we knew, and I said, here's all the tests I want. I was like, I'm going to diagnose myself, right? Here's all the things I want done. And all of this battery of tests I asked to have done, the things that stuck out were my red blood cell count, even though I've been borderline carnivore already at that point, lots of red meat and uh my hemoglobin was low. I was anemic, and that's had issues with my energy and all that. And then my CRP, my C reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation, which with our clients we tell them below 2, ideally below 1 is great. And all of our clients that go keto get there. And I had been keto for 10 years at this point. My CRP was 50.
Amazing.
And I'm like, okay. And I didn't have a cold or infection or anything. It was that was where I was sitting all the time. And so I knew something had to be wrong. And my at our time, our publisher, who had gone through his own chronic Lyme journey, said, I think you have Lyme. You got to get the right test.
Yeah.
And so we got the IGeneX Lyme disease test, which is much more accurate, looks at more bands and all this, all co-infections. And I tested positive for Lyme disease.
Yeah.
And one of the co-infections is Babesia, which attacks red blood cells.
Yeah.
And that, causing my anemia as well. So then I went down about a 1.5-year journey of trying every, thing you ever hear about for Lyme disease, with little success. But what I then started about 2 years ago is 100% carnivore.
Okay.
Cutting out all plants.
Yeah.
And that helped my pain a lot.
Amazing.
And so if anything I tried, going carnivore and cutting out all plants made my pain levels go way down.
Yeah.
Especially my migrating pain. One of the things with Lyme is Lyme and mold. I had a whole range of issues, but I had high mold as well. You get migrating pain in the joints.
Yeah.
So like I wake up in the morning and my right knee feels like I sprained my knee.
Yeah.
Didn't do anything. It just that morning it's my knee.
Yeah.
Next morning it's the ankle or the hip or both knees. And it would be debilitating enough where I'd almost need crutches to walk around with my hip
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
Um, when I'm 100% carnivore, it's almost non-existent.
Amazing. Does it change if you're in Wisconsin versus Maui? Do you notice
Yes,
that?
and that's one of the reasons we're here now
Yeah.
and we're staying for longer is that people with chronic Lyme disease will tell you it's very seasonal.
Yeah.
Even again, our publisher who now lives in Arizona,
Yeah.
he sees a big change in the winter.
Yeah.
One thing about the winter time that causes flare-ups of pain and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I was having a flare-up before we left in November, which, in Wisconsin, we were already getting snow and I was actually on crutches because of my hip for the 3 or 4 days before we left. And just to be able to get around with and manage the pain.
Yeah.
Um, got here and I haven't had any issues of walking since I got here.
That's like amazing. And why is it that there's so many false negative
Mm.
tests? Because so in New Zealand, in this kind of neck of the woods, Lyme's pretty rare actually. And in fact, to the point where some health authorities would say it's not even a thing in New Zealand. However, of course, you do have people, and I was reading a couple of articles yesterday saying, actually, you know what? Yes, there are people with Lyme. People travel and come back and bring it back. Just because the ticks might not be here or they might not carry that same bacteria doesn't mean that it's not actually an issue.
It's a much bigger issue than I think anybody, especially healthcare professionals, really understand.
Yeah.
There's even still people, even in the U.S., that doctors that think chronic Lyme isn't a thing. You just treat it with, 4 weeks of, minocycline, and it's gone.
Amazing.
There's a big lack of understanding of the problem. Even I think it was 6 years ago, which I'm sure it's higher now. They estimated, even with all the false negatives, about 300,000 cases a year in the U.S.
Right.
Now, that's with the false negatives, and like I had with the problem with the Western blot Lyme test is it only tests certain bands, and you have to be high in a certain number of them to be quote positive.
Yeah.
And they don't test any co-infections or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so you have a false negative rate. If you talk to a Lyme literate doc, I'll tell you that the Western blot Lyme test has a false negative rate of 60 or 70%.
Yeah.
You
Amazing.
really do have Lyme, but it says, you don't,
That's crazy.
which is what happened to me.
No, and I remember listening to a few podcasts, and one of them, Tim Ferriss, talking about his experience with Lyme, and that for him going keto was really instrumental in helping him overcome it. What is it, Craig, about the carnivore approach that is helping? So can you help describe to the listeners why that might be?
Yeah, sure. I think in my personal situation, it was kind of unique because, when I got Lyme, I had already been keto for like 10 years. And if you look at all of our clients and everybody that we work with, what we do is we have our clients go keto, and most of them see big improvements with their Lyme by going keto. Some, like me, keto wasn't enough. And going to carnivore, they see some improvement with keto, but going carnivore really helps.
Yeah.
But I think what happened with me is being keto for like 10 years before I even got it, it enabled me to manage it longer,
Yeah.
which was a blessing and a curse because with Lyme disease, if you catch it early, that 4 weeks of antibiotic might be enough
Yeah.
to take care of it if you catch it right away.
Yeah.
If it gets chronic, where you have it for years, what happens is it depresses the immune function and you get all these problems that creep in that normally your body could take care of because it's the immune system and detoxification pathways aren't working like they should. And so, I had heavy metals, I had mold toxicity, I had, all of these problems that creep in because of that you had it for so long.
Yeah.
And so again, it was like 7 years I managed the pain because I was eating keto. Yeah, and then I finally broke down. I had to do something.
Yeah.
But typically, if I was eating the standard American diet, it might have taken a few months, and I was like, okay, I got to take care of this, right? So that's part of the issue. But as far as carnivore, I think for myself, one of the things, obviously I have no proof of this. This is just my theory on it. Why carnivore works so well is because all plants come with anti-nutrients.
Yeah.
So, there's oxalates, there's, phytates, there's all these compounds in plants that are essentially natural pesticides that the plant has to evolve to develop over the years to fight off bugs and things from eating it. Because the plant doesn't want you to eat the
Yeah.
leaves or the stalk or the roots because it kills the plant,
Yeah.
right? It only wants you to eat the fruit and spread the seeds. And so it's built compounds in to defend itself. You can't run away like a deer can from a predator from eating it. So these natural compounds that are in it have to be detoxified by the body and got removed from the body. That's why it's an anti-nutrient.
Yeah.
Oxalate, there's nothing in the body that wants or needs oxalates. It doesn't need it, it doesn't want it, and it has to get rid of it through detoxification. Or removed to the kidneys, just it has to be removed. When you've got a chronically depressed immune function, like I did with chronic Lyme, heavy metals build up, anti-nutrients build up. And I think that was what was the big trigger for my migrating pain and some of the pain is that when you add to the existing load of everything my body's dealing with, the extra, load of the anti-nutrients from plants, it just is too much for my body. And eliminating them, I see a big relief.
Yeah.
And some of the first people to do carnivore, like Charlene Anderson, who's been doing carnivore for 20 years now, started because of her chronic Lyme disease, and that's where she saw relief.
Yeah, so interesting. And I of course Michaela Peterson, Jordan, I think she kind of popularized it a little bit. You've got Sean Baker, who doesn't necessarily have health issues. He's just, this is just kind of the way he eats. And I think, Craig, as because I've heard you discuss this before, and I think what I also really appreciate about it is that you're not particularly zealot about it. It's not like you're saying this is the way everyone should eat. It's quite clearly having a therapeutic effect for you. Yet it's not like you are now totally against anyone eating a salad, because it's quite different.
It depends on your goals. That we start out our books by saying, what's your why?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And especially with carnivore, why are you doing carnivore?
Yeah.
Is it for autoimmune disorder? Is it for Lyme disease? Okay, well, you're going to want to do it in this way. And we basically define what's we call the carnivore autoimmune protocol.
Yeah.
It's really like an ultimate elimination diet where you start out with beef and salt, and then you slowly add things back in and see what works for your body.
Yeah.
And it works really well for a lot of things like bipolar, autoimmune disorders, Lyme disease. We just see it as another tool in the kit, right? It's really, carnivore is just keto without plant.
Yeah.
And again, just like protein sparing, I would never tell Zach Bitter to do protein sparing modified fast days. He would suffer and hate it.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to fit his goals. I also wouldn't, if somebody likes plants and doesn't have any autoimmune disorders, great. Do a ketogenic lifestyle and be happy with that. You don't have to do carnivore as long as you get enough protein for your lean mass.
Yeah, yeah. So what does your carnivore approach look like, Craig? What's your diet look like on a day by day?
Interestingly, and I don't know if this contributes a little bit to how I feel better in Hawaii, but the diet is very different here than it is at home.
Oh, yeah.
At home, my wife primarily now, because it's harder for me, we bow hunt, and so we get some venison that we stock our freezer with. So I eat lots of venison.
Yeah.
Also, grass-fed beef, things like just hamburger patties, steak, I haven't found really any sensitivity to any particular protein.
Mm-hmm.
So I eat pretty much any protein, it could be fish, shrimp, anything. At home, though, it's primarily beef, venison, eggs, a little bit of dairy sometimes. Here, it shifts a lot because we're in Hawaii and fresh fish is amazing.
Yeah.
And so I start going down, lots of fresh fish. I eat poke almost every day here. So make our own little poke, which is a mayo that we make ourselves with some little bit of spice to it, and the raw ahi cut up, and I love that. I eat tons of raw ahi and fish here, and we do other fish cuts like mahi, a little bit of grass-fed beef and stuff while we're here, and eggs too to switch it up. But I eat lots of fish. I stock up on my omega-3s and DHA while I'm here.
Amazing, actually. And I was chatting to a Professor Stuart Gray, who is over in Glasgow, about muscle function and omega-3s, actually, and even the absence of doing resistance training, which of course is the most potent stimulus for, muscle protein synthesis and muscle building, that healthy older adults were able to retain muscle with just the addition of, I think it was 2 to 3 grams of omega-3 fish oils per day. So, which is actually quite a feat when you consider that, as we age, it's the fact that they're maintaining and not the inevitable kind of accelerated loss really speaks to how important omega-3s is for muscle function. So, Craig, I don't doubt that, there's a lot of probably really good health benefits from the type of diet you have in Maui.
Yeah, no, it's that's interesting. And one actually quick note on the as we age, protein becomes even more of a focus or need, because as we age, so the thing that stimulates muscle protein synthesis is primarily leucine, which is an amino acid that when we get enough of it, I think it's like 3.5 grams.
Yeah.
We trigger muscle protein synthesis. We kick off this mTOR process in the body where you build muscle. And the problem is that threshold of 3.5, it shifts when we age.
Yeah.
And so you actually need more leucine to stimulate that process to occur.
Yeah.
And so as we age, we typically say 0.8 or so times your lean mass for your grams of protein a day. That's in pounds. That's what our calculator uses. If you get as you age, get above 60 or into your 70s, now you're talking 1 or 1.1 or even 1.2 times your lean mass for protein goal, just to maintain.
Yeah.
Because you need that extra protein to maintain your muscle as we age.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I encourage women over 40 to really start looking at their protein intake for that very reason as well.
Yep.
And
you start in there, and it really becomes important when you get to the 60s and 70s. You really got to focus on.
Yeah.
And the problem is most women and adults, of that age, typically eat less protein.
Yeah. And in fact, if I've had this conversation with a lot of people, actually, is that we often hear that we eat too much protein, and it's typically because they're comparing what people eat to the very low recommended daily allowance, which is probably inadequate for most people who, want to thrive for sure.
Those levels, if you go look back at how they're established, you need it. What's the minimum level to stave off like disease? And so that's how they set those levels. It's not optimum, it's minimal to stave off problems.
Yeah. Now, Craig, just to finish up, I'm really curious. So you have 2 beautiful, thriving boys. Is it Mika and Kai? Is that right?
Mika and Kai, yep.
Yeah. How do they eat? What's your approach to their nutrition?
So we adopted them. It's 9.5 years ago now, from Ethiopia. They're 10 and 11. As soon as we brought them home, we just fed them what we eat.
Yeah.
Kai was about 1.5 at the time, and so he was ready for some solid foods. And we primarily anything we eat, we would just make in it for him.
Yeah.
If it was beef, we would puree it up into something he could eat. We supplemented that with bone broth in his bottle.
Yeah.
That was kind of his supplement to the meat and vegetables that we would just puree up for him. And they started out, because of the orphanage they were at, didn't have great, they struggled to feed all the kids, and they came to us at about 3% on the height and weight charts.
Wow.
Like barely registering, like 2 or 3%. And within a year, they were 50%. And within 2 years, they were about 75%. And they stayed there ever since. So, it's kind of funny because, first of all, it's meat and vegetables, which people are like, you feed your kids keto? You just feed them real food.
Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous. But on top of it, people say, oh, keto's not good for kids. They won't grow. And obviously that's not true. But if they get enough protein, they will grow.
Yeah.
the studies that's based off of are some studies of kids with epilepsy.
Yeah.
So number one, they have epilepsy. So this is not exactly applicable to everyone.
Yeah.
Number two, it was done a therapeutic ketogenic approach to control epilepsy.
Yes.
So it was 90% fat.
Yeah.
And if you calculate how much protein these poor kids were getting, it was like 30 or 40 grams of protein a day.
Yeah.
Of course, that's going to slow growth because you're not getting the amino acids you need to grow.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So they've eaten what we eat ever since, and they're just thriving.
Yeah, and you can certainly tell. And I just thought about how a little bit stalkerish that sounds, that I'm sitting here thinking, I've seen your children grow over the years, and just, but I guess that's the nature of the information and stuff
Social
you put
media,
out.
yeah, we put them out. They like being in, especially Kai. He loves being in the cooking videos.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it's so great to see. Craig, this has been great. Thank you so much for kind of taking the time this morning just to chat to me about. You've really kind of highlighted some of the main, I suppose, issues that people have with keto, and that how you might approach that in a way that helps optimize that for people. And you've really highlighted a couple of things which I really drive home when I'm talking to someone about a keto approach, as to, there's a right way and a wrong way. And that well-formulated ketogenic approach is exactly what you guys promote. And I love the addition of the protein sparing modified fast for those people who see that they've got, weight loss stalls and they're really struggling to kind of get through it. It's something which I use with some people with great success as well. And I just want to say thank you for all of the information you put out there. You guys are so generous with that, and really recommend that anyone who's interested in what we're discussing to follow the show notes through to your websites, and they'll see just a bunch of stuff which you've just put up there for free, which is so helpful for people.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's mariamindbodyhealth.com is our blog with tons of free information. Social media, it's usually Maria Emmerich or Craig Emmerich. And then keto-adapted.com is where we sell our ebooks and support. But watch out for, I'm not sure when this is going to post, but on the 25th, I believe it is, January 25th.
Yeah.
Watch social media, especially a Holly Berry social media account. There's going to be something coming up.
Mate, I wondered who that was. That is very exciting. When because a
live video cooking thing. So
amazing. Now, probably don't have time, but as I understand, Holly Berry, she's got type 1 diabetes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and she's used low carb to manage it for a long time now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
there's all our books. She loves them.
I cannot wait to see what that's about. Craig, thank you again for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Take care.
So hopefully you guys took heaps of notes in and around that, because there was a real wealth of information, and I absolutely recommend those books and resources. And on their website, there's just such a wealth of information that if you couldn't purchase anything, you could still go over there and get a ton of resources around recipes, articles, testimonials, and hearing other people's experience in and around ketogenic diets. And next week, I get to sit down with one of my best mates, Anna Frost, who trail runners amongst us will recognise as one of New Zealand's top professional mountain runners. And we talk about her transition from mountain runner to mum to coach and everything in between. And anyone that has ever followed Anna knows how open she is to sharing her experiences, because she really sees the value in doing so to help other people. And I don't doubt that you guys will be looking forward to that as much as I did chatting to her. So until then, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Mikki Williden, on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, and then over on my website, mikkiwilliden.com, where you can connect with me for one-on-one consultations or a family consultation, or hook into one of my nutrition coaching programs. I help people with fat loss, with longevity diets, or just a real food approach to take the thinking out of it for you. And that gives you access to meal plans, shopping lists, to me to help me individualize those meal plans, and a weekly forum and email where I do a deep dive into some of the science that I'm super interested in. And this week it was on the science of weight loss and weight loss maintenance. And also forums every Tuesday night so we can connect and I can help answer some of those questions that all of us have. Until then, if you like the show, please head on over to your favourite podcast platform, give us a 5-star review, and let people know how much you enjoy it, because the more people that review the show, the bigger and broader the reach, which is obviously beneficial for anyone who's wanting to help optimise their health and well-being. Till then, team, have a great week.